Hello and welcome back to Full Out, the place where we help you live your life full out and feel fucking great while doing it. I'm so glad you are here. On today's podcast, we have my friend Rachel Kelly on to discuss all things nervous system regulation, attunement, feeling safe in your body so that you can really create the life that you love. Rachel, after working for 7 years in various jobs in the mental health field as a clinical therapist, discovered the online coaching world. She made the bold choice to burn all of her papers she was going to submit to get her final clinical license, realizing the universe had redirected her onto a more aligned path. She's now been running her own business, Rachel Kelly Coaching, for 3 years, helping both men and women heal their nervous systems, process childhood attachment wounds, and relational trauma in order to create a life beyond their wildest dreams. Rachel focuses on helping you feel safe in your body so you can experience expansion in a way that feels grounded and authentic to you, designing any life you desire. I love this conversation. There's some really good insight as far as parents and how to raise your children in a space that really can support them and having a grounded, regulated nervous system. We talk about all of the coping mechanisms like depression, anxiety, ADHD, overworking, feeling burnt out. We talk about all of those and how to get to the root of what is actually happening in your system. We also talk a little bit about relationships and how to be in partnership and ask for what you need as far as your nervous system goes. I just love this conversation. Rachel is full of knowledge, wisdom, and insight. And I know you're going to love this conversation too. My friends, without further ado, here's Rachel Kelly. Yay, Rachel Kelly. I'm so happy you are here. We actually met in the gym, which is so
And
cool and so fun. And I knew we actually had our like a lady coffee date. And I want to share this story because I think a lot of women are funny about making new friends and meeting new people. And we literally met in the gym. I think we shared an Instagram message back and forth. And then it was like, hey, do you want to get coffee? Like, let's do a lady date. And we just went for it. And I want to inspire and invite you, the listener, to go say hi to someone at the gym, to ask them on a lady date if you feel a good vibe, because you never know who you're going to connect with. And you never know the magic that's going to come from that connection. So, Rachel, I'm so glad we connected at the gym. I'm so happy you are
yeah.
here. I can't wait to hear all of your wisdom and advice and coaching and support today. And just welcome to Full Out.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. And just yes, to everyone listening, like you never ever know. I took your best butt ever class, and here we are recording some magic for people. So you
It's
just
so good.
never know.
It's so good. So,
Yeah.
Rachel, I love to ask people when they're on the podcast, what does it mean to you to live your life full out?
Oh, I love that. So, living my life full out means that I feel safe in myself, in the relationship with myself, to literally create anything I desire. So, to be able to experience anything I desire. And most importantly, above all else, just being able to feel in my body how I want to feel. Because it doesn't actually matter what you're doing, right? You could be apple picking or laying on the couch. If you don't feel safe in your body and connected to yourself, none of the things really matter. You can't experience them full out. So for me, it's just having that internal safety to truly live and feel exactly how I want to feel. And from there, it's like there's just no limit. You can create anything you want, and it just becomes magical.
Yeah, from that space, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Can you talk about feeling safe? This I know is like the magic sauce of your work and what you do and how you help people. Can you talk to us about that? Because I know some people are listening to this and are like, what does that even mean? How
Mhm.
do I feel safe in my body? Or they already are pinged right now and are like, ooh, yeah, like I don't feel fully connected to my body, or I'm outside of my body, or I don't love my body, or I'm not in my body. Can you speak to feeling safe in your body and everything that comes with it?
Yes, absolutely. So, I just a little background, I had been in traditional therapy since the age of 4. So, by the time that I met my mentor at age 29, I had this perception that I had processed all of my trauma, that, I did feel safe in my body. I didn't even know what that meant. I thought that things like anxiety, overthinking, binge eating, binge watching TV, all these things that are so normalized in society, I didn't realize that there was another way to feel because this was just my norm. I was just, anxious, but I would go to therapy. I would talk about things and then I would come home and get triggered all over again and feel more anxiety, right? So it was always just these like temporary moments of relief where I was like, oh, okay, like I can feel like I can do this full exhale. But when I uncovered this work and I hired my mentor and we started doing this deep nervous system healing work on myself, I realized that all of those years of talking in therapy, I wasn't actually processing any stored emotion in my body. And so that is why I was living with chronic anxiety. I was living in my head without even knowing it. Like again, once you realize there's another way of feeling, you don't even it's like so unconscious and so sneaky that you're not even aware that you had been living that way your entire life. And it's truly mind-blowing. And so when I processed that stored pain and I came into relationship with this younger part of myself, so your inner child, whatever resonates for you. Some people like to just say the younger part. And you realize how their fear, their pain, their shame, whatever that stored emotion is that unconscious driver of your life, right? Every time you decide to engage in that behavior that you know is just not going to make you feel good, or every time you relate to yourself in the world through this like subtle energy of like perfectionism, control, um, just feeling small, like those subtle energies that most therapists that I, worked with, or if not all of them, they weren't able to pick up on that. And so it's really understanding that when you are not, feeling safe in your body, meaning you have symptoms, it could be any symptoms, anxiety, depression, ADHD, like literally any symptom can be healed. And that's my whole mission in this world is like, we have been taught that symptoms are here to be coped with, right? I used to teach coping skills as a traditional therapist because that's what I thought I did. That was my job. Okay, teach the coping skills. I didn't realize that things could actually be fully rewired and fully healed. And I think so often we focus on rewiring the mindset, but we can't do that until we've addressed what's happening in the body because it's body to the mind. And so feeling safe in your body means that you feel safe to be with whatever emotion comes up or whatever experience comes up in the present moment. So, unlike other, healing modalities that maybe you've experienced where the goal is to cope with that emotion or avoid that emotion, we are brilliant at avoiding without even knowing, or, just be able to handle that emotion. It's really feeling safe to fully, like full out, feel that emotion so that we no longer have to run away from ourselves. If pain comes up, we're safe to be with it. We're safe to allow it to help us grow, to alchemize it. If shame comes up, we no longer have to avoid it or make it mean anything about ourselves. We just get to feel it and be with it and use it as a teacher. Like when I act not in alignment with myself and I feel shame, that's really good. I need to feel that shame because then that allows me to look at where I wasn't actually honoring myself. So feeling safe in your body is you're no longer operating from all this stored pain from the past in your childhood. You are operating from the present moment. And whatever happens in the present moment, you're safe. You're safe to be with it. So then you're no longer not doing things in your life that you want to do because of that younger part of you feeling utterly terrified. Because when they feel held and safe, you get to just fully relate from your most powerful, authentic self. And there's literally nothing more liberating than that. So I know that was long, but
That
that's
was so
kind of what.
good. I was like, go, girl, go, girl, go, go, go. I love that you talked about the coping mechanisms and the coping skills. Like that is who I remember first getting into the personal development world, and that's what it felt like it was. It was always these band-aids, always these things to like optimize and shift, but we never got to the root of what was happening. And I know, even as a dancer, that I was so disconnected from my body, even
Yeah.
though I knew choreography and I knew how to move my body and I was in relationship in that I could control my body. I
Mhm.
was never really, until I started doing this deeper work, I was never in connection with the stored pain that was living in my body, the ancestral wisdom and pain that was in my body, and these things that were passed down or that I had personally experienced in life. And so I love that you highlighted that, because I think that's a huge distinction that I don't hear people talking about.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I am
Yeah.
curious, you mentioned some of the symptoms. Can you go a little bit more into some of the symptoms or
Mhm.
ways that people can know whether they are actually in relationship with their body or not? And then I want to hear about how do we actually shift it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. The number one thing I would say to understand if you are actually connected to your body, because I love what you just shared about dance. It's the same thing with any movement. Like, I remember being in yoga classes where, oh, I'm in yoga where I'm supposed to be connecting to my body. And I'm literally like looping thoughts the whole time. And I'm like, wait, an hour flew by. I wasn't even present. I was just kind of like moving without even really being connected to that movement. So I think that's a perfect example too of like, it doesn't matter if you're moving your body if you're not actually feeling safe to be like drop in and be really present with it. And I actually challenged myself when I took a dance class this past week. I was like, anytime I notice a thought, I'm going to challenge myself to come back to the present moment and see how long, like how big of a stretch I can make it of just full presence. Cause of course, thoughts are going to come up, like we're human. But going back to your question, the number one sign that your nervous system is still in survival mode and that you're disconnected from your body is how often are you living in your head? So, living in your head doesn't mean thoughts don't come up. Thoughts are always going to be coming up. We can't stop that. But there's a different energy and experience of, that feeling when you're just overthinking, you're ruminating, you're obsessing, you're like overanalyzing, you're just like looping and like, or even fantasizing, like anything that disconnects you from the present. And then you're like, wait, I've been thinking this loop for like 5 minutes. Come back, come back. When you process that stored pain, and you then don't have those same anxious thoughts, your mind just becomes a much calmer and clearer place where you're obviously going to have thoughts. Like I said, we're human, but those thoughts are not going to have this energy of fear underneath them because that is the root emotion of overthinking. It's like, if the fear comes up and the fear communicates to our brain, if you could just think about this more, you could just figure it out, you're going to be safe. It always comes back to safety and how our bodies know safety. So other symptoms, um anxiety, right? Racing thoughts, racing heart pounding. Like I used to wake up every morning, and as soon as I would wake up, it would almost be like, when you're first out of the womb and you're like, birth, and you're like, whoa, and your heart's pounding and you're crying. Like that's sometimes what it would feel like, where I would wake up and be like, why is my heart pounding? Like I'm safe. But that was that younger part that was just terrified. She didn't feel safe. Depression, right? Just feeling the shutdown, feeling like this emotion or this life is just too heavy. So when there's a heaviness, or even like things, I talk a lot about how adulting can feel really heavy. And so when we're doing basic things like needing to do the dishes or make the appointment or clean or just really take responsibility for our lives and ourselves, and that feels heavy, that's how we know it's coming from that younger part. Because no one really loves doing dishes, right? But it doesn't have to feel heavy of like, oh my God, I'm drowning in all of the things. It gets to just be like, when you're in your full adult self, you're just like moving through the day. You take time to breathe, to connect back to yourself. But it's not like, oh my God, I'm drowning, So that heaviness is historical. So that's another sign. Heaviness, it being stuck in your head, that chronic anxiety, even diagnoses like ADHD, right? So often kids are misdiagnosed with ADHD, and all that is a dysregulated nervous system. I can't even tell you how many kids I used to work with. Yeah.
No shit.
Crazy. Yeah, because it's like they look at this kid and they're like, wow, they're, all over the place. Well, one, they're a kid, so they're going to be all over the place. Let's just normalize kids being kids. And
Yeah.
two, when you're not taught how to regulate your emotions, and so you see a kid in the classroom, having behavioral issues, you have to get to the root of that. They have all these emotions in this tiny, cute little body. They're just trying to figure out how to regulate them. And so, I have clients that they were put on ADHD medications from the time they were children. And I'm like, this doesn't get to the root. It's just dysregulation. And so I would argue that any symptom, like literally any symptom, depression, anxiety, overthinking, ADHD, what else do we have?
I
We have
would
some,
throw in there also overpacking your schedule and just being busy, 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 like
yes.
doing, doing, doing.
Yep.
That's how I used to live. I would
Yep.
constantly, because there was a fear, subconscious fear of slowing down and actually being with what
Yes.
was in my body.
Yeah, 1,000%. Staying busy is a huge one for so many of us because, again, it's so normalized. And then another one would be OCD. Like I used to work with people when I was a DBT therapist, I would work with OCD in a very like specific way. And what I learned in the therapy field is we love to separate all these things of like, here's the treatment for OCD, here's the treatment for anxiety, here's the treatment for depression. And so I would learn all these different ways of treating all these different symptoms. And then when you really get to the root of it, they're all just like my favorite analogy is a tree. So you have the root and the trunk and then all these branches. All of the branches are the symptoms. So OCD symptoms, anxious symptoms, staying busy, overworking. It could be anything like over exercising. It's like the energy in which it comes from. And so then when you get to that root of what are you avoiding within yourself? When, like you said, when you actually slow down and get still with yourself, then you're actually able to feel the root emotion of all of those symptoms. And it may not come out all at once. We also usually need a safe grounded nervous system to be with us for our nervous systems to feel safe because that's a lot to to come
Can you
up.
talk more about that co-regulation?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you think about that emotion being tied to, let's say, 5-year-old you, 3-year-old you, a 3-year-old is not going to know how to feel that emotion on their own. They're just too young for that. And so the nervous system's job is to keep us alive. It's not to keep us happy. It's not to live full out. It's not to create a life beyond our wildest dreams. The nervous system gives no shits about that. The
I
nervous
love that.
system literally just wants to keep us alive. So if our whole lives have been anchored from this stance of nervous system wanting to keep us safe, it has learned that it is not safe to be with emotions. Now, where does it learn that? Childhood. Every time you had an emotion, how did your primary caregivers respond to that emotion? Did they sweep it under the rug? Did they get reactive? Did they call you a crybaby? Did they invalidate you? Now, the thing is that our parents are humans. They do the best they can. They have their own unprocessed trauma from childhood. And love is not the same as attunement. So, attunement is just being in tune with someone's emotion. So, none of us got the attunement we needed. Because again, we live in this world where, parents are having to juggle working, taking care of the kids, taking care of themselves, all the things. And so, that younger part of us needs someone to attune to them. And so, what I do with my clients is sometimes our sessions literally are just me sitting in silence with them as they are just being with deep emotion. And I'm just mirroring back to them, like, I am here with you. You are safe to feel this emotion. And it just allows that nervous system to feel like, its entire conditioned response of avoiding that pain, it's showing it a new reparative experience of you no longer have to sweep these emotions under the rug. You no longer have to feel invalidated. you get to actually learn how to feel safe to feel these feelings, because that is authenticity, right? We can't separate our emotions from our authentic self. And so when people are saying, I feel so disconnected from myself, maybe without even realizing it, it's because they never learned that it's actually safe to be with those emotions. So we need that co regulation to learn how to self regulate, because we were never taught that as kids. Can you imagine if we learned this stuff in school? We would have a much more regulated society. But we don't. We live in a traumatized society because none of us learned how to regulate. So that co regulation just allows the person to feel held and safe, and that younger part to feel like they're getting those emotional needs met from childhood that they didn't have met. And that is relational healing in a nutshell. It's just everything.
So good. I love what you said about love is not attunement. That
Mhm.
is an incredible phrase because I think that a lot of times when we start to dive into this work, we're looking at our parents and we're like, wait, they were supposed to be superhuman and they were supposed to take care of us and they were supposed to do
Yeah.
XYZ. And then we're able to see our parents for the human that they are. And I love that the attachment piece and the attunement piece that you separate it from love. Like my
Mhm.
parents could have loved me with their fullest heart and their fullest ability. And that's
Yeah.
different from attunement. I think that is fucking profound. If you have not done post on it, you should because I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
Um,
It comes from Dr. Gabor Mate, because he talks about attunement, and
yeah.
like attunement just means being in tune. So baby is crying, mom or dad sees that and is there in that. Think about how many times our parents, they love us so much. It's so painful for them to witness their child experiencing pain. So their first instinct isn't, oh, let me just be with my child in their sadness, in their fear. It's how can I make them not feel the fear? How can I make them
Yes.
not feel the sadness? And that's coming from a place of love, right? No
Sure.
parent wants to sit there and be like, this is great. My child's feeling pain. No, but that's the whole point of attunement, is like, Dr. Gabor Mate talks a lot about this, of like, when that child doesn't feel that attunement, they then feel like they have to sacrifice their authentic emotion for that attachment relationship, because we depend on our attachment relationships for survival when we're kids. So now as adults, it's like, how can we really give that younger part that reparative experience where we are attuning to those emotions rather than just, okay, I love you, and so I don't want you to feel upset,
I don't
right?
feel bad. Yeah. I mean, my brain is going in a million directions. First, I'm like, what do you say? I'm going to say all the things and you can go wherever feels exciting.
Okay.
First, I want to feel into like, what do you say to the parents that are like, fuck, Rachel Kelly, I
Yeah.
am doing a service to my kids. How do I parent in a way that's going to support my kids in the best way possible? I think about the school systems. My mom's a principal of an elementary school, and I think about what shifts and changes could be there. Just that's where my brain goes of like, how do we support young people? And then I also, the third piece is really, how do we do this for ourselves? And the
Yeah.
last piece that my brain wants to go to, because my brain is so excited by this, is I'm thinking about my relationship and having to
Mhm.
really teach my partner that I don't need him to fix my problems. I really just want him to be there when I cry. I don't need
Yeah.
the solution. I just want the support. And
Tot
we actually, we have very clear requests in that is, do you want the solution or do you want to support? Do you want me to give you a hug or do you want me to brainstorm with you? And
Mhm.
that communication has been really powerful for us.
Yeah.
Because it just validates that emotion is real. I'm able to be held and I feel like I can move through what I need to move through,
Mhm.
which is powerful in our relationship. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I threw a bunch at you.
So we'll start with the elementary school and like parents listening. So I work with some parents, and it's always something that I preface of like, as we're going through this work, you're going to have some light bulb moments of like, oh shit, I totally invalidated my kid, or like, oh my God, I totally did not hold space for them, right? So we don't know what we don't know, right? I didn't know any of this until I learned it. Like, I wasn't taught this in grad school. I learned this after grad school when I met my mentor. That's the most mind-blowing part, is we're not even taught this, and I'm a clinically trained therapist.
That's
Mind blowing.
fucking nuts. Fucking nuts.
Crazy. Crazy. What did I learn in grad school? I learned CBT therapy, which is about changing thoughts. Again, not processing emotion, narrative therapy. And I went to one of the best grad schools in the country. Like, it's just, anyway, we could do a whole other episode on that. Um, but yeah, I think for parents listening, one, it's understanding that we don't know what we don't know. And so once we know better, we do better. And so just have gentleness with yourself, have compassion for yourself, understand that you are operating through your own wiring, which again, so much of that is unconscious. And so you couldn't have done differently if you weren't aware that you even needed to do differently. And the thing too is that parents get really worried, and I I see this with my sister because she's raising my niece and nephew. They're like 2.5. And, we talk about, she had ordered one of Gabber's books and she was like, I'm scared to read it because, what if I find out that I've just been like fucking up? Like there's this fear of everything. I need to do everything perfectly because they're so vulnerable and all these things. But the biggest thing I can tell parents is, it's not about what you do. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but it's more of the energy in which you are relating to your child. And so it's never too late. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh shit, like I'm having all these memories come up, like it's never too late to start doing things differently. I have a client that I work very closely with, and she has 2 teenagers. And so, when she learned about this work, she's like, well, it's too late to go back to when they were babies. But she's now relating in such a different way where her energy is the leader. So when they're, acting out, she's able to get to the root of, okay, what are they actually needing? We get so focused on the behavior that we're like, why is this behavior even happening? Because there's some need underneath. So, one, even if you fucked up, forgive yourself. It's okay. Like, never too late to start relating differently. Two, focus on the energy. So, it's not saying the right perfect thing, doing the right perfect thing. It's you think about your child absorbing your energy. That's all nervous system and generational trauma is. It's us absorbing the energy in our mother's womb. And then in childhood, we're just absorbing that energy and that energy and that energy. And so if you can start looking at, am I relating from that fear-based place of needing to do everything right as a parent because I love my child so much, that stress is going to be more harmful
Yeah.
than you fucking up on a surface level thing, right? And so it's like, how can you role model for your kids that you are human, that you are going to mess up, that you are going to have big emotions? And how do we teach them through the way in which you relate to those emotions, right? Like, so think about in an elementary school, kid is acting out in class. Does the teacher become that calm, grounded nervous system where they're able to get the child back to this place of regulation and safety? Or does it trigger their stuff where then they react and they yell and they have the urge to, make it a bigger thing than it needs to be? So when my clients get triggered, or let's say they get reactive because we're looking at really hard stuff where sometimes I'm going to trigger them, like the things that I tell them, they're going to want to get defensive. They're going to want to project on me. They're going to want to say, like, no, that's not true. And so rather than me taking that personally or then projecting on them or getting reactive or whatever it is, it's me being that anchor of safety, of stillness, of co-regulation so that we can get to the root. Because so often what happens with teachers, with parents, with school systems is we take the behavior and we blow it up to be this big thing, and it just makes it worse. And we're never actually getting to the root of why this child is acting out in class. There's a reason. There's a very valid emotional need that they are learning to get met through acting out. I think about this all the time with my dogs. I don't have kids, but I have dogs. And I think about the fact that every time my dog does something, like he just ate the cat food, before recording this, and I was like, "Oh my god." Every time I respond with giving that attention, it reinforces it. So in those moments, you're going to feel like you need to discipline and you need to, teach them the right way. That is giving them attention. And I know that's so hard to unlearn. I even heard my neighbor the other day tell the kid, like, you're going in a timeout. I think about my own childhood. I was put in timeout. I got attention. That was how I got attention. So kids need attention. So whether or not they're going to find that attention through doing things, the way that you want them to, or doing things in a not so great way, if you give them attention for it, that's reinforcing the behavior. So you have to look at, okay, if my kid needs attention, which as all humans, that is a basic need. We need
Yeah.
attention. That's okay. It's what kind of attention do you want to reinforce? So when they're, just like behaving in a way that's really great, or helping them get to like, how are you actually feeling? Right. Just like getting to the root is the whole point. Um, so yeah, that
I
was
love
that
that.
was a lot. But and then just to touch on the last part of the relationship, like
Yeah.
what you're doing in the communication aspect, because so I work with men as well. The number one thing that they've been conditioned, I have a role to fix. That is what men know how to do. That's, they feel purposeful. If
Yeah.
my girlfriend's upset and I can fix it and she's not crying anymore, I can go to bed feeling like I've done a good job as a partner. So one, it's understanding that's literally the conditioning that men have been, taught. And then the communication piece, like helping, if it's I hate to compare, dogs again, but it's the same thing of like, if my dog is acting out, I know that they need a job. So if I can give them a job, it's the same thing with your partner. Your partner wants to feel like they have a job. So rather than saying, I'm crying and I don't need anything from you and I don't need, and which, sometimes you might just need some alone time. That's valid too. But think about how we can redirect the job from fixing to just repurposing that. So the job can be holding space. The job can be, can you take the dogs out so I can have a moment of peace to myself to just self regulate, right? It's like that communication piece to make them feel needed, to make them feel purposeful without attaching that to fix, fix, fix.
Mm.
That's how we start to rewire that, which,
So
is
good.
the learning process for both people.
So good. It's so, so good. And I know for me, in that, there was a lot of growth for me in using my voice, asking for what I needed, asking for what I desired. For him to be like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough when I'm just sitting here and holding your hand. Like there was so much growth in that. And it really has shifted our relationship as we've both been in the play of what does this look like and what do we both actually need? And it's been so good. Going back to the dog thing really fast, I love the dogs because even my our dog trainer that just trained Moose, we were at a session with him and he was saying, he's like, and he knows nothing about nervous system or anything. And he's like a cuckoo crazy guy, but he's a great dog trainer. But he said to us at some point in some conversation that he will not even pick up a leash, will not go into training if he is not in his best energy. If he's
Mhm.
stressed out, if he's anxious, if he's upset, he's like, it is irresponsible for me to do that. And it's co-regulation with the dogs. Like they're
Yes.
literally feeling that. And so I think that's so cool. He had that
Yeah.
intuitive understanding without the science based, but I just love that.
It's leadership, right? It's like it's leadership with our dogs, with ourselves, with our partners. It's my mentor has this expression of the strongest energy leads. And
Mm,
so if you think about a dog and a human, it's like, well, they're a dog and you're a human, so you're gonna have the strongest energy. Or let's say you and your partner, let's say you've done more of the healing work, you're going to be the one to
yeah,
have to lead a little bit. And, sometimes we have resistance to that of like, I just want someone else to lead. But the thing is that when we're not leading ourselves, we have to lead ourselves anyway. Right.
yes,
So
yes,
if we're going to have to do it anyway, it's what's going to feel better, taking the lead and having these conversations and expressing and using your voice and all the things versus staying in that it is a little bit of that little child energy of like wanting the parent to take responsibility. It's like,
someone to do this for me. Yeah,
right,
totally.
exactly. So the more that you can do that, the more it shifts for the other person. And the dog example reminded me of just in terms of energy. So the past like 6 months, I've been in this like dark night of the soul, and I'm finally on
Mm.
the other side of it. And during that, there was so much fear that my animals were all feeling it. So I have 2 cats and 2 dogs. And my cat ended up needing emergency surgery, and she had a bladder stone. She one morning I woke up and she was bleeding and her thing, like it was a whole thing. And I was processing with my group around like, okay, how did I attract this in? Like, what's happening energetically for me? Not only that, that happened with the cat, but also like my dogs had been acting out a lot more. Like things just felt a lot more chaotic. My cats were fighting, like just it was a zoo in here. Literally, it was just crazy. And so I'm like, okay, what's happening in my energy? Well, I'm having a lot of deep fear come up. I was going through a lot of change, a lot of shedding, a lot of just shifting into this like next level of sovereignty, and all of that fear and that chaos within my body they were feeling. And so how do animals or children or anyone get their needs met? It's the same thing when we're in childhood of if mom is feeling depressed or anxious or sick or whatever the thing is, and they're not well, we're going to go into survival mode and think, well, how are they going to take care of us? And so then we find ways to get our needs met. For me, that was getting sick. I would always get sick and I would get my needs met. And so when I think back to that time with my cat surgery, it's like, oh yeah, like she needed to find a way to get attention because I was such a fucking nightmare tornado at that point that she was like, where's mom?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
because again, it shows I could give them food and water, but we all need connection. We need
Yeah.
attunement. We need, um, yeah, we need that affection. So, I could do the bare minimum of like, okay, I'm feeding her, I'm drink, but I
Sure.
wasn't connected to myself, and so I wasn't connected to my animals. When I processed through that fear, which did take some time, like sometimes we have emotions where we can process them and we move through it in like 5 minutes and we're like, wow, that's amazing. It was so quick. Other times when we're going through massive up levels and transformations, the fear can be there for a solid few months. And I mean, in full transparency, it made it longer because I was resisting. I was engaging in addictive behaviors to avoid the fear. Had I
Absolutely.
fully surrendered and just owned the fact, like, because we have so much shame around how scared we get as adults. If I could have just owned the fact, like, oh, I'm fucking terrified, I probably would have saved myself a good chunk of those 6 months. But
Yes.
nonetheless, emotions take the time that they take to move through, and then also how we relate to them. But once I landed on the other side of that, my dog wasn't barking anymore. My cat was healthy again. Like, it felt like a completely different home that I was living in. And I was like, my energy is creating all of this. And,
Yes.
hearing that can be hard for people because they feel like, it's victim blaming, and it's like, it's never about that. It's empowering you to literally understand how fucking powerful you are. Like, it's
Yes.
wild.
Yes, 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 yes. And I have such a similar story and timeline. And it was like, as soon as I could really face it,
Yeah.
really, really, really face what was coming up, everything shifted in my business. Clients
Yeah.
came in, the retreats happened, the next thing happened, the next, like, and everything
Yeah.
started flowing. For me, it actually felt like once I was able to get to the other side of it and really be in that deep, deep fear, my life
Mhm.
force dropped in. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I feel like myself again. And
Totally.
it impacts my partner. It impacts how we are in relationship. It impacts all of these other areas of business, of money, of all the things. So this is such an important, I don't want to say skill, it's an important relationship with
Yeah.
self. And
Absolutely.
so I would love for you to speak into, we've talked like all around it.
Mhm.
How do people actually start to shift these things? How do they create
Yeah.
safety in their body? And I'm looking at the time and I know that we got to wrap up soon, but I really want
Yeah.
to make sure we get into this and give people some tools.
Absolutely. So there's so many different entry points to this depending on, are you ready for a level of support where it is going to be like a relational container, like the work I do with my clients? Or if you're listening and you're like, I'm not ready to invest any time, energy, and money into a relational container. I just want to start with what I can do on my own. The best place to start is really becoming an observer of your life. So I want you to look at like, what behaviors do you engage in to avoid yourself? Because we have to start with how you're avoiding yourself to then get to not avoiding yourself. So for me, it was binging TV, it was binging food, it was staying busy, it was overworking, it was living in my head. So if you're resonating with any of those, or for you, it could be alcohol or weed or whatever the thing is that you use to, we call it in our society unwind, but sometimes it's not actually unwinding, it's avoidance.
Thank you
My
for
favorite
saying that.
one. That's my favorite one with TV. It's like, well, I watch TV at the end of the day to unwind. And it's like, that's actually winding you up because of the dopamine and the stimulation of your brain. It's not actually unwinding. So, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But it's looking at, what do you do? Like, your daily choices, the way in which you spend your time and energy with yourself. How are you engaging in those behaviors that take you away, that disconnect you from yourself? And getting so curious, if you were to not do that behavior, or let's say decrease that behavior, what actually comes up for you? And so it's basically taking this, like, if you have one of those, I don't know what they're called, just like the scales, where it's like, do, do. And one side of the scale is the avoidance, which comes from your trauma. The other scale is connection. So disconnection and connection. And if you just start to shift the balance, even just a little bit, right? We're not going to get rid of all those behaviors overnight. We're not going to stop overthinking overnight. It's slowly bringing this balance of, okay, if I spend 5 hours on my phone every day, can I slowly shift into maybe 4 hours, right? And in that hour that I'm not on my phone, and I can just add a little bit of stillness into my day. What happens for you when you get still? Now, this is another thing that drives me crazy about the therapy world I was in, is we reinforce this idea that we should be avoiding stillness. So you can't meditate. Okay, do a walking meditation, do a dancing meditation. Now, yes, there's a time and place for that. If you have severe trauma and you literally do not feel safe to get still with yourself until you have that support, absolutely meet yourself where you're at, right? But the goal is to slowly incorporate even just little moments of stillness so that you can slowly titrate the experience and show your nervous system that you're safe. So, a great simple way to do this is to choose 1 to 3 daily habits that connect you home to yourself. So, if you're not ready for full stillness, it could be like, for me, going back to dance class, I feel connected to myself, right? It could be journaling, just brain dumping. It could be dancing to a song every day. I don't know if you follow, there's a woman on Instagram. I think her name is Rachel, something with an H. I forget the last name, but she dances to a song every day in her home. Every day, that's her ritual. Now, she talks about how this helped her get through divorce, helped her get through grief, helped her get through the darkest times. Why? Because the nervous system loves consistency, and that
Mhm.
daily consistent action of dancing in her house to a song every day showed her nervous system an anchor of new safety. So instead of having to reach for the glass of wine, having to reach for the overthinking, whatever those protectors are, we're reaching for something that actually connects us home to ourselves. Singing, chanting, humming, dancing, journaling, just sitting in stillness, anchoring to breath, grounding in nature without the phone, like anything that connects us home. If we increase that amount of time and we do it consistently every day, so every single day for the past 3 years, I journal, I do a specific chant, and I meditate. And it doesn't have to be those 3 for you. It's just start with one thing that allows you to get even a little bit more still with yourself. And when you're getting still, notice what's happening for you. So, another really simple tool is, anytime you notice your brain overthinking, drop out of your brain, redirect your focus, put your hands on your heart, and take 3 to 5 deep breaths. And just notice what emotion is coming up underneath that overthinking. and notice the resistance, right? Maybe you notice overthinking, you drop into your body, you start breathing, and there's a lot of resistance comes up because there's emotion coming up, and your brain's just gonna, you have to start outsmarting your nervous system. You have to start leading your nervous system. So your nervous system is going to want to go back up to the brain, right? Because that's how it knows safety. Refocus. And it just takes a lot of practice. So I would say, all in all, noticing when you're in your head, breathing into your body, just noticing what comes up, choosing 1 to 3 daily habits that can increase that amount of self connection and stillness time. Like, we need to get still with ourselves every day. So meet yourself where you're at, but know that that's ultimately where you're going, is stillness, because stillness is where we have that stored emotion come up. Like, literally think about your nervous system being in survival mode, running from a bear. That is how our nervous systems are when we're overworking, staying busy, constantly avoiding ourselves. And a lot of this is just getting to know yourself, right? Like, I know when there's fear coming up, if, let's say, this happened this past weekend. Okay. So I went to the mall for something. I came home and then I realized I forgot something I wanted at the mall. So then my brain was like, "Oh, just go back. It's fine. Just keep going, keep going, keep going." And then I took a moment and I was like, "What? I don't need to. There's no urgency. What is the urgency?" Like, take some time and just ground and breathe. And so I knew that there was some fear coming up where my body just didn't want to get still. And so I had to catch that. And instead of going on autopilot and driving back to the mall and then being like, why did I just do that? I got still and breathed and was just like, okay, what's actually happening for me right now? Okay, there's some fear coming up. So we need to learn how to get still with ourselves. And again, meeting yourself where you're at to slowly increase towards that. When you do, you're just going to allow that stored emotion to come up. Your nervous system is going to, allow as much of it to come up on your own as it feels safe to. And then you eventually might need that other person to hold you in that. And so, like you said about you and your partner, like, that's such a beautiful example of relational healing of, oh, I don't need to be with all of this pain alone. And so, again, like, even if you're not in a place where you're ready to invest in, like, professional support in that area, practice with the people, like you're doing, practice with the people around you. Like, when your friend is having emotion or when your partner's having emotion, can we practice just slowing down, getting still, breathing, being with each other? It's all about slowing down. Like, my supervisor in grad school, he said, if you take one thing from our time together, and like, out of all the things he taught me about trauma, about all the things, if you take one thing, it's just helping your clients and yourself slow down. My mentor said that to me yesterday. She was like, it's always about slowing down with you. I was like, yep, it always comes back to the same thing.
I feel that so deeply.
Yeah.
So, so good. It's so good. I think there's one last little piece that's coming up as I'm hearing this too is, in my group containers too, there I set very clear guidelines at the beginning that when people are processing things or sharing things, that our job in the container is not to fix, is not to shift, is not to be like, oh, but, or try to make it better, but it's simply to witness. And
Yeah.
that can feel really uncomfortable because we've never been taught to be that solid witness and
Yep.
how to hold versus that what you were speaking about earlier with the parent wanting just to fix and have that person feel better. I think that our society is very uncomfortable with seeing emotion expressed, whether it's sadness or grief or rage and anger. I do a lot of sacred rage work, and
Yep.
it's very triggering for a lot of people. And so I think
Yeah.
that one of the best ways to become an incredible partner or friend or support for someone is to be able to hold without that need to fix or shift or
Yeah.
change, but simply to be and breathe with them. Huge.
Absolutely. And just to notice what happens for you when you are in that position, right?
Yeah.
Because we can only hold as far as we've held ourselves, right? If we haven't even held our own emotion and then someone's like, "Please hold this heavy, bucket of pain with me," and that feels unsafe to you, you're going to be
Yeah.
like, "No, I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with pain." Right?
Yeah.
So when I think about, therapists, like when I was in the therapy field and I was able to guide my clients to a certain extent, like coping, right? That's because I had learned those things myself, but I wasn't able to actually guide them to deeper pain because I had yet to do that with myself. So
Yes.
we have
Yes.
to just look at like what is coming up for you. And I see this all the time too with male female relationships of like we're begging men like please be more vulnerable with us, like please, and then they're vulnerable with us and then the woman's like, oh, like this is new, I don't know how to hold this. We hear this all the time in Real Men Heal, my men's group, is like they will start becoming more vulnerable. Their partner has no idea how to hold that, and then it shakes their sense of safety of like, oh wait, my boyfriend's supposed to be the rock, the strong one, and now he's crying, and like, am I attracted to him? Like, what's happening? Like,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
like this double expectation of like, men, please be vulnerable. Okay, I'm being vulnerable. Oh wait, no, now I'm not attracted to you. And so they get all these mixed messages. So I think it's just another example of when you're asking for something, you're asking for someone to lean in into vulnerability. How much have you been able to do that yourself? And just noticing what comes up without judgment, without making it mean anything about you, just so much curiosity, because that will give you so much information of what still needs tending to in your own body. And that's okay. That's brilliant. That's really valuable to know.
So good. Rach, I could talk to you for another hour, but we gotta close it up. We gotta shut it
Yes.
down. We gotta shut it down. Where can people find you if they want to know more about your work?
Yeah, so the main page would be Instagram. That's where I'm on the most. Of course, I have my website and my own podcast and all the things. But Instagram is where I connect to most of my people. So, yeah, it's the at Rachel_Kelly_coaching. So you can come say hello. My DMs are always open, and love
Amazing.
to meet all the people.
Amazing. My friends, if you loved
Yay.
this conversation as much as I did, share it with a friend, send it to a sister, take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, tag us at Rachel_Kelly_coaching and at Samantha Jo Harvey. We are so grateful for your time and energy. Go live your life full out. Thanks for being here,
Yay.
Rach.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me. If today's podcast inspired you in any way, we would love your support in spreading the word. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and let the other queens in your life know that they are also worthy of living life full out. If you want to continue the conversation, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram or Facebook at Samantha Jo Harvey. Have a fabulous day, and I'll see you next time.